Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Hometown Heroes podcast. Today, I'm with the legendary Mr. Tressel. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Thomas. Good to be with you.
So, first, I wanted to talk about the impact that your father had on your life as a man, as an educator, and as a football player.
You know, I was so blessed, Thomas. Right where Finney Stadium is right now used to be an old stadium, and our house was right next door to it. So I had a chance to watch my dad work every day. Not everyone gets to see their dad go to work every day and follow him over there and be in the locker room and just idolize those players. So from the time I was 5 years old, I was at the stadium watching him, seeing the difference that he made with his players. He had a deep care and concern for his players, not just as players, but as students and as people, and the expectations he had for them. So I knew fairly early that I wanted to coach. I wasn't sure that I wanted to coach college. I was thinking maybe high school, but one thing led to another, and I ended up in college. But uh, just watching the impact and watching the closeness uh, that his players had, and then years after they would come back to the house. Our house had a third floor, and sometimes even had players live up on the third floor when they were struggling a little bit or whatever. And and the other thing that I saw from him was he had a very deep passion for us to be as good as we could be as students, but he wanted to win. He didn't apologize for wanting to win, and he was highly competitive and worked hard and so he was a great role model, as was my mother, who was constantly there. She sewed the names on the back of the jersey. She fed our players. So I mean, I just had a wonderful upbringing with two older brothers who became educators, and I've read, Thomas, where the best way for a human to learn is through example, and I had great example with my entire family and all the coaches and faculty members around BW. It was a close knit family that uh, was a great example for all of us around it.
You talk about that closeness that you and your family had. I read also that the players would come over for pancake breakfast on home games. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And I would read that your mom, she would sew the jersey, she would tutor the players. That's unbelievable to me, that closeness that you talk about. That would be an amazing experience.
Well, as I've had the chance to work at a lot of universities and so forth, one thing I used to brag about at Youngstown State was that we had the intimacy at Baldwin Wallace, where everyone was family, everyone was helping one another, and so forth. And that even though we were a larger school, I always felt we had that kind of closeness in Youngstown and that family atmosphere, uh, the high expectations, uh, and that hey, we could accomplish anything. And again, when you have that example every day, then you can take it on with wherever you are. And even when we were at a place like Ohio State, I always felt like even though it was a giant place, we had that closeness of a Baldwin Wallace.
I think that's important, even like in coming up in a small Catholic school and being together as a close group that helped us, playing state championships. Whereas teams may be bigger than us. I think was a huge part of it is how close knit the group was. So to your point,
And that's what's fun about athletics is they really do bring a community together, whether it's a school community or whether it's watching the Glenville community in inner city Cleveland. That just brought that whole community together with the great teams that Glenville has had recently. And I always felt that was what was neat about being at Youngstown State, was kind of brought the whole region together. It was something we could all cheer about. And then when we were at Ohio State, I felt like the community was the whole state, and it was the alumni all over the country, all over the world. And athletics has that ability to bring that spirit of community. And you're lucky when you've experienced that, because then you can take it out into whatever community you end up living in.
exactly. So to that point, do you think when you were recruiting at YSU and Ohio State, how much of a priority was it to recruit Ohio and to stay home for the home team, so to say?
Well, we had a phrase we coined, Thomas, when we first went to Youngstown State. We called our recruiting area was the state of Youngstown. And because, Western PA is right there. And so we didn't want to just limit it to Ohio because we were 8 miles from Pennsylvania. And I always felt that Pittsburgh was a lot like Youngstown and Warren, very similar culturally and close knit families. And I think having that really basis of your program being that family, that it means, something about your own backyard means something. And so at Ohio State, we absolutely we wanted a high percentage of our people to be from Ohio, but we also wanted to bring in other cultures and other diversity of thought and other skill sets and so forth. So we did some recruiting out of state, but the core of our team, if we had 100 players, probably 70 of them were from Ohio.
That's that's how I've always felt. I just wondered, how that approach, now it's even crazier with recruiting and all things like that. But I think there's always that aspect of playing in your own backyard. It just means a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's something you've grown up dreaming about. It's something that you want to make a difference, like the people before you in Youngstown or before you at Ohio State or before you at Baldwin Wallace. In fact, I was just reading an email this morning. Some of the guys, the former players at Baldwin Wallace, the first Thursday of every month, they get together down at Mike's, where Mike's is down on
Yeah,
Front Street there.
yeah.
And they always send out an email. Some of the guys are in town, out of town. Not everyone can make it, but they always, send messages. And these are guys that played 50 years ago. And I've had a chance to get there a couple times and just to listen to the stories and see the pride in what they were a part of. And a lot of them, even if they went elsewhere for their professional careers, come back, and because, Baldwin Wallace is home for him.
So you mentioned, growing up, you pretty much watched your dad do all this stuff and you idolized him. So there's a quote you said is, I always knew I wanted to play football at BW. So talk about your time playing quarterback at Baldwin Wallace, and you talked about these connections that you still go on, like these Thursdays at Mike's. Talk about that.
Well, it's the world probably wasn't as small as it is now. And, we thought something an hour away was a long ways away. Uh, and, there wasn't as much TV and there wasn't as much exposure in athletics. And you knew what you knew. And I knew watching those guys from the time I was 5 years old to 8 years old to 12 years old to 15 years old. Those were the guys that I idolized. Sure, I had heard of Ohio State players and Cleveland Browns and so forth, but it was really real to me. Those Baldwin Wallace guys were real, and I saw how good they wanted to be. And as I was growing up, uh, the new stadium was being built. So my freshman year was the first year of George Finney Stadium,
Wow.
and it was a unbelievable thing that we were going to have this brand new stadium. We were one of the first ones to have artificial turf, and plus I knew the history and I knew how hard it was to play there because you got to be good to play there. And people sometimes, it used to bother me, they'd say, well, I might only be able to send my kid to Division III. I said my freshman year we had 109 freshmen. 68 of them were the captains of their high school team the year before. I mean, we had players. I was a freshman quarterback. We had 12 quarterbacks, and you had to fight like crazy. And so there was no question in my mind. I was proud to play at Baldwin Wallace, and now just to see the facilities you have. We don't just have Finney Stadium, but you got the PAC and what the Cleveland Browns are doing. I guess the future of that whole north side of Berea is just going to be incredible what they're going to be building there. So I think Baldwin Wallace has got a huge, bright future.
I would agree with that. So in talking about your dad, I know this was a little bit after you, but how cool was it to see him win a national championship and then kind of inspire you, I guess, maybe?
Well, there's no doubt he always wanted to be the best. And probably one of the things I regret the most is my senior year at Baldwin Wallace. Um, we were playing in the Ohio Conference Championship game against Wittenberg, and winner was going to go to the Final Four. And unfortunately, I threw an interception going in. I shouldn't have thrown it. I tried to fit one in a window that wasn't open, and they picked it, and we ended up losing by 3. And to this day, I think, man, I wonder if that could have been, our first national championship. But that was always a goal that he had. He wanted to be the best, and that was just something we expected. And then when I went on to Akron as an assistant coach, by good fortune, my second year there as an assistant coach, we played for the national championship in Division II, and we lost to Montana State. It was a tight game, and then I had a chance to go on and become the head coach at Youngstown State, and that's all we talked about, is that our goal was to be the national champions. And it's a pretty neat thing. I think there's only ourselves, my dad and I, and Coach Karras and his son, I think, are the only father and son who have both won national championships, and it's something we're awfully proud of. And my dad and I right now are the only father and son both in the College Football Hall of Fame, which is a pretty neat thing for Baldwin Wallace. But it just reminds you that my dad set the standard of wanting to be as good as you could be. And he felt that we could attract good enough players at Baldwin Wallace to be amongst the best in the country. And if you think about our conference, the Ohio Conference, it's always, whether it was back when Baldwin Wallace and Wittenberg were kind of up there, even Heidelberg back in, I think it was 1973, right in there, won the Stag Bowl. Capital one time played for the Stag Bowl. So the Ohio Conference has always had a chance. If you can find your way through the grind of the Ohio Conference, who knows? You could maybe be the champion.
100%. I agree with that, and I did see that thing about you and your father, and that's something that you can hold on to forever, because that's really special.
Yeah.
It's really special. So you have been all over the country, but what is it about the Mahoning Valley that sticks out to you and separates from everywhere else?
That is an interesting thing, because there is something to that. I know when I was at Ohio State, we had alumni groups all over the country, whether it was in Portland or Seattle or San Diego or Dallas or Phoenix or Atlanta or Charlotte or, Miami, Florida. And so we would periodically try to get to 4 or 5 different cities every year to visit the alumni associations. And it was interesting because obviously a lot of the people that came to those events were graduates of Ohio State, who many of them were from Ohio, and their professional careers had taken them all over the country. And so when I would meet people there, and they'd introduce themselves, and I'd always ask them, did they go to high school in Ohio, and did they grow up in Ohio? And some will say, yeah, I'm from Dayton, or yeah, I'm from Cincinnati, or yeah, I'm from Toledo. But when they said, I'm from Youngstown, I'm from the Mahoning Valley, I'm from Warren, their eyes would just light up. I mean, it was just different. Not that the other people weren't proud of where they were from, but it was different. And I think in large part, and I'm not a historian, but as our region in the Mahoning Valley developed, it started out as an agricultural region like everywhere else. Then all of a sudden, when the Industrial Revolution happened, we were right there in the crosshairs of the Industrial Revolution with steel, Pittsburgh, right, Cleveland, Buffalo, the automobile industry into Detroit. And so that, what they call now is the Rust Belt, but that was the Industrial Revolution. And I think the people that moved to the Mahoning Valley came from all over the world. They came from many different countries. And, just like you find in Youngstown or you find in Warren, there's different neighborhoods where the Irish grew up, or the Italians grew up, or the Jewish population grew up, or it was just natural. They kind of created neighborhoods, and they built churches, and the Greeks were over in Camel, and all that type of thing. And but what became really cool was that the pride in their communities and in their high schools with high school football, that became the social center of that area. I mean, Friday night football, uh, that became crazy in that area. And that's why I think if you look at the history of a lot of the coaches that have come out of the Mahoning Valley, it's because football was such woven deeply into the fabric of the culture of those communities, and a lot of pride in players that went to the big schools in the NFL, and went on and did great things, and but there was that was part of our DNA. And I think the growth of the Mahoning Valley and its love of the game of football, toughness, team, the family and the team was so important in that region. That's what made it so much fun to be the coach at Youngstown State, and and then at Ohio State, when we always had some Mahoning Valley guys in our roster.
It's funny that you say those things because when I was looking at a college, it's like I kind of wanted a replication of that and somewhere that maybe isn't as close. And when I went to BW, I got that feel. I would see your name, I would see all these names, and I got a feel for it. It's like this sense of like grit and blue collar type of you got to bring your lunch to work every day. And it's funny because my linebackers coach is my recruiting coach, Coach Nickel at BW, and he told me a story one time that he interviewed you, I think, in his senior year, and he only talked to you once, and then when he got hired at BW, you remembered his name, and to him, and when he told me that, I said, "Wow, that's something that people can look up to. Meeting someone once and remembering their name, that's a true character, that shows a lot about who you are." And I wanted to point that out because I think that's something that I've never really seen before and that I commend you for doing.
I appreciate it, but the people in your life, you'll find out, uh, are what's important, and the connections that you have, and no matter where. It's funny. I went up to the bowl game January 1st in Tampa, Florida, to see Wisconsin play LSU, because the head coach at Wisconsin, Luke Fickell, was on my staff at Ohio State, and the defensive coordinator is my nephew, uh, and the secondary coach, Paul Haynes, was on our staff at Ohio State, and the recruiting coordinator, Greg Gillum, was on there. So I drove up, to see the game. And I was in Fort Myers and drove up hour and a half north to Tampa. So they had left me a pass at the hotel to pick up so I could get in the game, and I wanted to stand on the sideline. I said, I'm not good sitting in the crowd listening to all the Monday morning quarterbacks and so forth. So I stopped at the hotel. I got the pass, and I parked at the stadium at Raymond James Stadium, there where the Buccaneers play, and I'm walking in trying to figure out, okay, where do I go to get in with this pass? Because nowadays all these tickets are electronic, and the security. And so I walked up to this lady and I said, "Hey, where does this pass? What's the door you go in with this pass?" And she said, "I'm not sure. I'll go get my supervisor." Well, this young man walked over, and he said, "Hi, coach, how you doing?" I said, "Oh." He said, "My name's Evan Helgeson. I'm from Baldwin, Wallace, and I'm in charge of security. We have a company in Tallahassee, and we're in charge of security for big events, and come right through here and go in the door, and this and that." So I got to stand on the sideline, and I was talking to some people and talked to Coach Fickell and all the coaches, and midway through the second quarter, this African American gentleman in a suit, you could tell he was like part of the who was running the whole show there at the bowl game, came up to me and introduced himself. He said, "Hey, I'm from Baldwin Wallace." I said, "Oh my gosh, here I am in Tampa, Florida. Wisconsin's playing LSU, and the two people I meet are from Baldwin Wallace." And it makes you proud.
That's a cool little story. So, who would you say has been the biggest influence in your life?
I would think it was my mom. My dad was one of those guys. He worked 100 hours a week, even though he was 100 yards away from me, in his office or out on the field. Uh, I spent more time with my mom, uh, like all kids do growing up. Uh, and it was so obvious to me that her whole goal in life was to serve whoever she could serve. It was us kids, and she was tough on us. We had a little paddle hanging from the kitchen. It was called the Board of Education. And if we didn't do things right, she got the Board of Education and whacked us, because she wanted to make sure we understood there are certain ways that you do things. And then I'd see her in the community, and I'd see what she did for my dad's players, and not just my dad's players, but other sports and other students. And it didn't matter. She worked in the College of Education part-time, and she helped place student teachers and help them get ready to become teachers. And I never had a title. She never had paychecks. She just, every day she woke up trying to figure out who she could serve. And the combination of watching my dad's example on the job and then her example 24 hours a day, the two of them are my biggest influence, but my mom was so unselfish that that was the greatest lesson I ever learned.
Yeah, it does seem like you had two great examples in your life. That's
Yep.
awesome.
Yep.
So we talk a little bit about influence. What caused you to write the winner's manual?
That's interesting. After we won the national championship in 2002, they wanted us to write a book about the season. And I said, hey, those kinds of things last short time. So we ended up getting with an author and writing a book called What It Means to Be a Buckeye. And it was not a book I wrote. I did the foreword, but I said, why don't you just go talk to all these people and let's just have a 1 or 2 pages about every one of these guys and talk about what it means to be a Buckeye. So we did that. It was a successful book. And then about, I don't know, 5 years later, a publishing company came and said, hey, we'd like you to write a book about your program, how you run your program. And I said, well, I don't really have time to do that, and so forth and so on. And they said, well, we just did a book with Tony Dungy, and he had time. And so I can imagine you have a similar schedule. And they said, well, call Tony and see if it was excruciating, and we'll make it easy for you. And so I called Tony, and he said, yeah, and it wasn't bad. And so I sat down with a co-author, and we just talked through how we used our winner's manual, which we had developed at Youngstown State and then at Ohio State. And we just talked about how we used it and how it was a tool, not just for our guys as football players, but for our guys as students and as people and future careers in many different areas. And so it was just kind of easy because I didn't really have to write the book. I just had to share with this co-author, here's what we do with our winner's manual. Here's why we do it. Here's the impact we think it's had. And I told him, I said, I don't want to write a book about sports stories because the shelf life, lasts however long till the next sports story, I guess. But I want to write a book that people can use for years. And what's amazing is that I think we published it in 2008. And we were doing it a little bit as a fundraiser because we were renovating our library at Ohio State. And so we sold hundreds of thousands of copies because, the Buckeye Nation is big. But what's been interesting to me is we continue to have people kind of look at those timeless stories. That it's more about how we tried to do things as to any trivia questions or any of that type of thing. So to this day, we continue to have groups use it to help them build their teams, their businesses, their organizations. And it's been a lot of fun, and it's interesting. I've had so many coaches in the past, gosh, I don't know, 15, 20 years that have written their own winner's manual, which is tailored to their program. And I always told them when they said, oh, I want to write a winner's manual for us, can I borrow yours? I said, well, you can borrow ours, but I recommend you write one that fits what you guys mean and what you guys believe in and how you want to go about things. And really all of them except the one person that borrowed my winner's manual just changed the name on the cover and changed the names inside. But other than that, I'd say the other 30 or 40 that have sent me copies of their newly created winner's manuals put their own signature on it. It became about their school. And it's really been, I've really enjoyed, I think reaching the goal we had, which is to have a timeless document that could be helpful and add value to people, for many, many years.
Yeah, I like what you said about, schools adding touches to that, making it their
Yeah.
own. That
Has to
that
be their own. Yep.
right.
You can't go copy someone's offense or someone's defense or someone's program. You have to make yours. And we used to have people come and visit us all the time at Ohio State and Youngstown State and wanted to study what we were doing, X's and O's. And I used to always tell them, you better figure out who you have doing the X's and O's and what do they do best. I said, because you might not have Teddy Ginn. You might not have AJ Hawk. We might have been able to do some things that you might not have the same situation. So figure out why that offense or that defense fits your personnel, and then you'll have a chance to be successful. I think it's one of the things my staffs did best over the 25 years I was a head coach was they always did a good job of figuring out what our guys could do, and then that's what we did, as opposed to seeing something on TV or reading about something and say, oh, well, we want to do this. Well, maybe that doesn't fit us. And we played in those 25 years in 9 national championship games with 8 different quarterbacks, all different. Those quarterbacks were all different. And I think it's because our staff did a good job of finding out what our quarterback could do. And then that's what we asked them to do.
That that's brings up a great point. You found your skills of your people and you developed them for what they were
Right.
good at. And
Yep. No question.
that's good. So transitioning gears a little bit here, how important has it been for you and your wife to be involved in FCA, or for those that don't know, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and a special, I don't know if you say plug, our FCA meetings are actually in the Tressel Lounge.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. When I was a junior in high school, my high school coach asked myself and one of my buddies to go to an FCA camp in the summer. And we didn't know anything about FCA. And I thought, well, okay, I'll do anything my coach asks, and so I went to that camp, and I realized that I thought I was going there to be around a bunch of guys playing sports and competing and having fun and this and that, and we did all that. But I was there really to think more about the journey spiritually that was out there for me, and that's where I created the habit of quiet time, because every day at the camp we had quiet time and we spent time in the scripture. And when I came back after that camp, I remember going to my high school and saying, hey, we're going to start an FCA huddle and here's what we're going to do. And this will be exciting. And that's what we did. And then at BW, we had FCA, and we always had some excellent chaplains and advisors and so forth that would help us get speakers and, that type of thing. But no, Fellowship of Christian Athletes really was probably the direction, the North Star that I needed. I was a good student and I liked sports and I think I was a nice kid or whatever, but there was something missing that in terms of a passion. I went to church and, all those things, but it really gave me that direction, that passion for what's most important in life. And it's exciting that it continues. I know we have an FCA Steel Valley back in the valley that works with the high school programs, and at Youngstown State, I know we have an FCA program, and Chaplain Pastor Donaldson and that group. And so it's exciting to know that FCA is still alive and well at BW.
Yeah, we have a great turnout every week. We have it every Mondays, and yeah, it's great. It's a great.
It's a great reminder to us that school is important, and passing that test is critical, and sports are important and so forth, but it's bigger than that. Our lives are so much bigger than that. Uh, it again, it has, ever since my coach sent me to that FCA camp, that's been my North Star. That's been what's always gotten me back in the right direction, even though we always, stumble and fall and that type of thing. If you have that North Star, you can always get back up and head in the right direction.
I think that's a great message to go off on, Coach. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Well, my honor, Thomas. I'm proud that you're a Yellow Jacket. Proud you're from the Valley, and let's do it again sometime.
Sounds good. Thank you, Coach.
All righty, have a good one.
You too.